For the last 500 years, there's been this quiet, epic battle fought over one single question. How does the world really work? On one side, you've got the master of strategy, and on the other, the moral philosopher. We're about to dive into their incredible debate to figure out who is right and who really holds the keys to power in society.
So let me ask you something. It's a question we all bump into, right? In your career, in your life. Do you have to play hardball to get ahead? Or can you stick to your guns, to your moral compass, and still make it? This is the very heart of the conflict we're getting into today.
All right, let's meet our two heavyweights. In one corner, you've got the worldview of the prince, basically a how-to guide for power politics. And in the other corner, you have the perspective of the saint, a search for something deeper, for an inner moral truth. So here they are, our two guides for this journey. First up, Niccolò Machiavelli, the ultimate pragmatist. His famous book, The Prince, is a no-holds-barred manual for rulers on how to grab power and, more importantly, how to keep it. And his opponent? Blaise Pascal, a genius mathematician and philosopher who, in his work Pensées, was looking for something else entirely, a deeper, more authentic truth.
Okay, let's start with Machiavelli's world. And honestly, it's a world that's probably going to feel pretty familiar to you. It's a place where power is the name of the game and winning is all that matters. Everything Machiavelli believed, well, it all starts right here with this quote. He basically said, look, if you want to be an effective leader, you have to be brutally honest about what people are really like. And in his view, people are, at their core, selfish and untrustworthy. So for a ruler, being naive isn't just a weakness, it's a fatal mistake. So think about it. If people aren't naturally good, then what happens to a ruler who tries to be good all the time? They're gonna get crushed. To survive, Machiavelli argued, a leader has to be willing to bend or even break the conventional rules of morality when it's necessary. It's not about being evil for the sake of it. It's about being effective enough to hold on to power.
And he's got this amazing metaphor for this exact strategy. A ruler has to be two animals at once. You have to be strong like a lion so you can fight off the wolves at the door. But you also have to be cunning like a fox so you can see the traps before you step into them. If you're just a lion, you're all brute force and no brains. If you're just a fox, you're too clever for your own good but can't defend yourself. A successful leader has to be both.
But here's the thing. This is where it gets really interesting. Machiavelli's world seems to make sense, right? Be strong, be cunning, but there's a huge catch. What happens when everyone starts playing by these rules? This is what we call the player's paradox, and it's the hidden flaw in a world built purely on strategy. The best proof that this system has a flaw? It's Machiavelli's own life. For a while, he was on top of the world, a brilliant advisor in Florence. But then the political winds changed. The very game he was a master of turned on him. He was arrested, horribly tortured, and then just cast aside. He died without ever getting back the influence he wrote about so brilliantly. His own life shows that just being cunning isn't enough to save you. So his story kind of begs the question, doesn't it? If everyone in society is just trying to outsmart and manipulate everyone else, does the whole system just fall apart? Can anyone actually win in a game like that? Let's look at this through the modern lens of game theory. Okay, this is the classic prisoner's dilemma. Imagine you and your buddy get caught for a crime. The cops separate you. If you both keep your mouths shut, you each get just 1 year. Not bad. But they offer you a deal. If you betray your partner, you walk free. That's a huge temptation. Now, from a purely self-interested Machiavellian point of view, the smartest move is always to betray. But here's the paradox. Your partner is thinking the exact same thing. So you both betray each other and you both end up with 5 years. Way worse than if you had just trusted each other in the first place. And that is the fundamental problem. A world where everyone is always betraying each other for some short-term gain is a world that eventually just grinds to a halt. Think about a workplace where everyone is constantly backstabbing each other to get ahead. Nothing gets done. Trust completely vanishes, cooperation is impossible, and in the end, everybody loses. So if Machiavelli's game always ends with everyone losing, what's the alternative? Well, this is where Blaise Pascal comes back in. He argued for a totally different foundation for society, one that wasn't built on strategy, but on something much, much deeper. This is the key difference. Where Machiavelli was all about what's on the outside, projecting strength, appearing virtuous, Pascal was obsessed with what's on the inside. He believed that a good life and a good society had to be built on a real, genuine moral core, on truth and humility.
Now, to make his point, he does something really fascinating. He proposes a famous thought experiment we now call Pascal's wager. He comes at the question of belief not just from a place of faith, but as a rational choice, almost like a strategic bet on the best way to live your life.
All right, check this out. Pascal lays it all out like a gambler looking at the odds. He says, look, if you bet that God exists, and you're right, your payoff is infinite, eternal bliss. If you're wrong, well, you lost out on a few earthly pleasures, a finite loss. But now look at the other side. If you bet against God, and you're wrong, your loss is infinite. From a pure risk management perspective, he says the only logical bet is to believe. The potential reward is infinite, and the potential loss is just catastrophic.
So how in the world do we put these two completely opposite ideas together? You've got the cutthroat player and the humble believer. Well, the answer might be that they're not really opposites. They just operate on two different levels of reality. Think of it like this. The world we see every day, that's the surface layer. And yeah, it often looks totally Machiavellian. People are competing, they're strategizing, they're trying to get an edge. But the secret, the only reason that game can even be played is because of the foundation underneath it all. And that foundation is Pascalian. It's built on the fact that most people, most of the time, choose to be honest, to trust each other, and to cooperate. That's the bedrock that stops the whole thing from caving in.
So maybe the ultimate takeaway is this simple. Machiavelli's playbook, it might help you win a game. You might win a negotiation or get that promotion. His tactics are for the short term. But Pascal's values, things like trust, morality, cooperation, that's the stuff you use to build worlds. You use it to build a family, a company, a whole civilization.
Here's one last way to look at it. Machiavelli is like the brilliant doctor who can perfectly diagnose a disease. He shows us exactly what happens, how people behave when you take morality out of the equation. But Pascal? He's the one who writes the prescription. He shows us why that moral law is the one ingredient you absolutely cannot live without.
And that brings it all back to us, to you, in your own life, in the choices you make every single day. Which role are you playing? Are you just a player in the game, always looking for the strategic angle? Or are you part of the foundation? Are you one of the people building the trust that holds our world together? The choice in the end is always ours.